Hello friends, this week's contemplative video is going to be an attempt to show in more detail, or let's say close the loop, in our study of shamanism and mysticism, showing how the two are intimately connected, and most importantly, how Buddhism is that link between shamanism and mysticism. And what we're going to do is we're going to use linguistic anthropology to show that fusion or that link between those three subjects. Now remember, we're not looking for the broad description of mysticism or shamanism. We're looking for what I consider authentic shamanism or authentic mysticism. And as I've been showing all along, they're one and the same. They just occur in different cultural contexts. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at linguistically the term shaman. The term shaman arrived in the English language in the 19th century from the research of Russian anthropologists who were studying tribal societies in the Russian region or northeastern Europe. The Finno-Ugric are among those tribes that were studied. And they found evidence of out-of-body experiences and altered states of consciousness, and those were not necessarily all due to the stimulation of psychedelic drugs, although there is a mushroom that grows in Eastern Europe, the fly algeric, or otherwise known as the Amanita muscaria, can produce psychedelic experiences. But as we've shown in the past, psychedelic experiences are not necessarily the means to the mystical experience. It just simulates that experience. So anyway, Russians applied the term shaman, Russian anthropologists applied the term shaman to priests of tribal societies in Eastern Europe, and most notably those priests or witch doctors, whatever term you want to use, shaman, exhibited various mystical experiences, as I said, such as the out-of-body experience. And so Russian anthropologists applied the term shaman to those subjects. And that may arguably be a term that has been used in the Russian language for quite some time to describe tribal peoples. But I can show that the Russians got the term shaman from the Chinese. And the Chinese got that term from Buddhism, as Buddhism arrived in China most significantly during the 7th century when Islam was conquering Persia. That forced Persian Buddhists to flee and down the Silk Road to China. And in China they embraced Buddhism, and they transliterated a lot of Sanskrit terms, such that the name for a Buddhist priest was known as Shaman, two Chinese characters, Sha and Man. And so when Buddhism was transported to Russia at about the same time, then the term shaman became the two Chinese terms are fused together into a single term that is called shaman. And it turns out that Russian Buddhism existed for up until the Russian Revolution. There are still Buddhist monasteries throughout Russia, and the Russian libraries have a great deal of Buddhist literature in them. So the term shaman originally was applied to Buddhist priests in Russia, but it was later applied to tribal priests or witch doctors or shamans, whatever term you want to use. Okay, so the Chinese got shaman from the Sanskrit version of the Pali Canon and Persian Buddhist priests as they arrived in China in the 7th century. Now, Pali has a similar term. It's called samana, and that's the term that the Buddha applied to himself and his followers as to describe themselves as spiritual seekers. Now, if we look at what the Buddha's lifestyle was and his followers' lifestyle, they were basically mendicants who lived in the forest and begged for their food, and they traveled from point to point preaching their message. And so the term samana used by in the Pali Canon is really a term that means mendicant. And it so happens that it's actually a Sanskrit term that arrived in Pali. And that Sanskrit term is shramana. Shramana, if we look at Sanskrit literature, pre-Buddhist Sanskrit literature, the term shramana appears, and it describes, again, a mendicant or maybe a shaman, typically somebody who lives oftentimes by themselves in the wilderness, who oftentimes will come into town and beg for food. And Shiva would be a good example of that pre-Buddhistic existence of a spiritual seeker who lives in the wilderness and wanders about and begs for his food. So we can see now how the movement of the term shramana from Sanskrit, northern Indian Vedic religion, moved to the Magadhan-speaking peoples, which is known as Pali, and became Samana, and then moved back across India into Persia under the conquest of Ashoka, an Indian Buddhist king, and Milinda or Mahindra, a Greek Persian king who also embraced Buddhism. And Buddhism basically had a flowering in Persia, where the Sanskrit version of the Pali Canon was most commonly used, because Sanskrit was very similar to the Persian languages. And then it got transported to China and then to Russia, and then in the 19th century made it to the Western Europeans in anthropology. So friends, a shaman is a mystic, and it's closely related to Buddhism. Thank you. I hope you are all rigorous contemplatives. I hope that you are all experiencing the ecstatic altered states of consciousness and gaining the fruit thereof. Have a great week.